Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and today I'm doing a Raul Troubleshooter Commander deck. Raul is a new card from the Fallout Commander decks, specifically the Mutant Menace deck, and I thought he was a very cool card and wanted to show him off in his own deck. So, Raul Troubleshooter is 1 blue-black legendary creature zombie mutant rogue. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from among cards in your graveyard that were milled this turn. Then you can tap him to have each player mill a card. Raul is quite unique because being able to play spells that you've milled is not a really defined strategy. You know, we have spells that you play stuff that's in your graveyard, but not specifically on what you milled that turn. So there's a lot of really cool advantages we can kind of take with that. There's no mana restriction and no card restriction, so just anything we want. So there's a lot of really cool things that we want to self-mill ourselves, and in the process, mill our opponents. So there's a lot of really great value things here where we can mill our opponents, maybe mill them out, or we can mill ourselves. So starting out, I split this deck into Mill Matters cards that let you return stuff from your graveyard other than just Raul, and just your staples and good stuff cards that you would need in a blue-black deck like this one. So let's start out by looking at the cards that I put in this deck to mill yourself and potentially mill out your opponents. Starting out, 3 cool cards I want to talk about are Court of Cunning, Hedron Crab, and Mesmeric Orb. So Court of Cunning is 1 blue-blue enchantment. When Court of Cunning enters battlefield, you become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, any number of target players each mill 2 cards. If you're the Monarch, each of those players mill 10 cards instead. So not only can you make yourself mill, but you can mill all your opponents, and if you can retain the Monarch, then you can mill 10 cards, which will give you quite the selection. Hedron Crab, one of my favorite cards from Zendikar, not necessarily better than its counterpart, Ruin Crab, but I put both in the deck. So Hedron Crab has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Ruin Crab notably doesn't let us mill ourselves, so Hedron Crab is the better choice for this deck. But then we have Mesmeric Orb. Artifact, whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. This is great if you're playing against opponents who have a lot of permanents, maybe a lot of artifacts or creature tokens or who knows what. All of that are going to make them mill more and more every turn, and that's just going to help us already start out Raul's ability. So love this card. The next couple cards I want to talk about are combo related cards, specifically with mill, and then one I thought was pretty neat. So we have Duskmantle Guildmage, Mindcrank, and the Ancient One. Duskmantle Guildmage and Mindcrank are 2 of my favorite cards, and I didn't realize this was a combo until I put both of these in one of my decks and then accidentally comboed off with them and then realized it was one of the biggest combos in this color combination. But Duskmantle Guildmage is a blue and a black creature human wizard, 1 blue-black. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere this turn, that player loses 1 life. 2 blue-black, target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. And then Mindcrank is an artifact with whenever an opponent loses life, that player mills that many cards. So the way that this works is you activate Duskmantle Guildmage's first ability, making it so whenever opponents mill, they lose life. Then we have to make a mill, so if you can deal damage or cast some other spell to make the mill, that'll start Mindcrank, which will in turn have Duskmantle deal damage, and then Mindcrank will activate again, and it's a loop, and you will mill your opponents out. And notably, these colors are pretty good at generating a lot of mana at some points, you know, with some powerful artifacts. So if you have enough mana, you can just activate both of Duskmantle's abilities, combo with Mindcrank, and you can just win without even having to touch your opponents, which is a very, very powerful thing to do, and one of the reasons I love these 2 cards in this combo. It is a little rude, you know, I would say, you know, if you're playing with friends, maybe, you know, go ahead and throw this in, but if you're playing at a place where, you know, you're playing some precons, throwing in a combo, a 2-card combo especially, that is kind of uninteractable, is not the nicest thing. But then the Ancient One here is just a blue and a black for an 8/8, which is incredible, but it has a send 8. The Ancient One can't attack or block unless there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, and for 2 blue-black, draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard that card, target player mills cards equal to its mana value. In this case, we're probably going to be milling ourselves, but it is quite nice that we get an 8/8 for 2 blue mana, and it's probably going to be pretty easy for us to get up to 8 permanents to activate Descend. But the rest of the mill cards I wanted to include in this deck are Altar of the Brood, Bruvac the Grand Delinquent, Cruel, Somnophage, Deathcap, Marionette, Deranged Assistant, Emery Lurker the Lock, Feral Ghoul, Milkin, Ruin Crab, Stitcher Supplier, Struggle for Project Purity, Undead Butler, Vault 12, the Necropolis, and Zelix Sanity Flare. So now this next section of cards is going to be looking at the reanimation side of this deck. You know, obviously our commander reanimates, but blue and black has quite a number of cool, powerful cards, mostly black, that can help reanimate stuff that you mill. But before we do that, I just want to say, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. It would mean a lot to me. So let's start out by looking at Crucible of Worlds, Dance of the Dead, and Dread Return. Crucible of Worlds notably is going to be pretty strong in this deck because we're going to be milling a ton of stuff, and one of the things that blue and black, you know, sometimes deals with is not being able to ramp very well. So obviously being able to play lands out of your graveyard is very powerful and is going to help us a ton. I think Crucible of Worlds definitely deserves to go in this deck. After that, we have Dance of the Dead, one of my favorite enchant effects because it's not, you know, one of the ones we normally see. You know, normally you see Animate Dead, or I think we just got a reprint of Necromancy as well, which is the first reprint of Necromancy in forever. But Dance of the Dead reads, take target creature card from any graveyard and put it directly into play under your control, tap, with +1/+1. Treat that creature as though it were just summoned. The creature does not untap during its controller's untap step. At the end of his or her upkeep, its controller may play an additional 1 in a black to untap it. If Dance of the Dead is removed, bury that creature in its owner's graveyard. Unlike the other reanimation spells, this one does come with a little bit of a downside. It comes in tapped, and you have to pay 1 in a black. But I think just having another version of Reanimate in your graveyard, or, you know, Animate Dead, is well worth the cost, you know? Animate Dead, you know, it gets smaller. Reanimate, you have to pay a ton of life. So there's a cost included in all these cards, but I think playing 1 in a black for a awesome creature is definitely worth the cost. In addition, you're actually buffing it up, which is something you don't get to see a lot. You know, normally there's a lot of downside. Paying 2 mana every turn isn't necessarily the worst thing. And Dread Return, sorcery, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield for 2 black, but then it has flashback, sack 3 creatures. Dread Return is a staple card, and I like it especially in this deck because we're probably going to be milling it, and then we can just use it from our graveyard. So the second set of cards I want to look at for the reanimation section of this deck are cards that help you cast or get other things out of your graveyard. And this was something that I thought was pretty neat because there's not too many commanders that let you cast stuff from your graveyard, but there are some cards that are actually very helpful in doing so. So Lord of the Forsaken, River Kelpie, and Sepulchral Primordial are the 3 cards I want to bring up. So Lord of the Forsaken, 4 black creature demon, flying in trample, black, sack another creature, target player mills 3 cards, and pay 1 life, add a colorless mana, spend this mana only to cast spells from your graveyard. Lord of the Forsaken is pretty neat here. I didn't realize this card had come out. You know, I've never built a deck around this, and, you know, looking for cards for this deck, I found it and thought this was pretty powerful. You can basically use your life to generate enough colorless mana to cast whatever you need, and then that way you can use the rest of your mana on your turn to do other stuff. So I like this effect. I think it could be pretty powerful. You know, maybe it could lead to your demise, but you just could be, you know, careful about that. So River Kelpie is next. It is 3 blue creature beast with whenever River Kelpie or another permanent enters battlefield from a graveyard, draw a card. Whenever a player casts a spell from a graveyard, draw a card. So we kind of have a massive amount of upside here with River Kelpie, because not only are we going to be having permanents enter from our graveyard, but we are also going to be casting spells from our graveyard, potentially drawing 2 cards off of Raul's ability every turn, refilling our hand. That's pretty great. In addition, this has Persist, meaning it'll stick around for a board wipe or after somebody tries to remove it. So actually pretty helpful card here. And Sepulchral Primordial is 5 black creature, avatar with Intimidate. When Sepulchral Primordial enters battlefield, for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Just great, you know, thing. If we mill this using Lord of the Forsaken, you know, we can just pay 2 black and 5 life in order to get this and get another 4 creatures. So that seems pretty powerful to me. But the other cards in this category are pretty well known, with Animate Dead, Necromancy, Oversold Cemetery, Reanimate, Sir Conrad the Grim, Takenuma Abandoned Mire, Tormod the Desecrator, and Victimize. So the last section, as always, is talking about these staple cards in this deck. And there's a lot of cards that just you're already going to put in this deck, you know, just because it's blue-black. And I didn't really want to talk about those. I want to find cards that were kind of unique. And these aren't necessarily the most unique, but I figured they were worth talking about. We have Blood Chief Ascension, Ice Crown Scepter, and Notion Thief. So Bloodchief Ascension, single black enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Bloodchief Ascension. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Bloodchief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. Bloodchief Ascension is going to kill your opponents very easily. Having it just gain quest counters for your opponents losing life, and then you being able to mill them for who knows how many, you're going to be able to just wipe them out with this card alone. It's very powerful. They just got reprinted, so the price is way down on this, so definitely check this card out. Ice Crown Scepter, one of the best Magic cards ever printed, primarily because you can go infinite with it, but when you cast it, imprint, when it enters battlefield, you may exile an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand, then pay 2, tap, you may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Again, one of the best cards ever. Dramatic Reversal is also in this deck. You know, I don't think I have too many mana rocks, so I think you could go infinite, but maybe that's something you want to look into if that's a strategy you're really going to revolve around. But there's a lot of other really great instants in this deck that you're going to want to copy. And then Notion Thief, 2 blue, black, creature, human, rogue with flash. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one they would draw in each of their draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. Notably, you want to cast this at flash speed, and you know, our commander's going to mill a bunch of stuff, so potentially you're not going to be able to, but all the other stuff in this deck is going to be able to get that back out there and prevent anybody but you from drawing additional cards every turn, powering up your board. But the other cards in the good stuff category is An Offer You Can't Refuse, Arcane Signet, Brainstorm, Chain of Vapor, Counterspell, Dark Ritual, Dothie Voidwalker, Deadly Rollick, Demonic Tutor, Displacer Kitten, Dramatic Reversal, Drown in the Lock, Fierce Guardianship, Flusterstorm, Lightning Greaves, Muddle the Mixture, Mystical Tutor, Opposition Agent, Phyrexian Metamorph, Rapid Hybridization, Saw in Half, Sensei's Dividing Top, Soul Ring, Talisman of Dominance, Thassa's Oracle, The One Ring, Thought Scour, Toxic Deluge, and Vampiric Tutor. Wow, that was a lot of cards. Real quickly, I'm just going to list the non-basic lands I think you should put in this deck. Obviously, earlier I said Takenuma, but I also think Mystical Sanctuary, Otawara, Soaring City, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and Urza Saga all deserve to go in this deck. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found some cards that maybe you'll consider putting in this deck if you're going to be building it. Raul seems like a real cool commander, and I'm very excited to see more decks and see him being played. But if you want to tell me a card you think should go in this deck, or maybe there's a card that you don't think should go in this deck, you know, please let me know down below in the comments. That would really help. In addition, if you could leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe, that would mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So today's Scryfall card of the day is Captive Flame. Kills and cooks your food in one easy stroke. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.